if you had supported the peace option, we had a chance. I'm convinced we had a chance. But so long as, my real problem was that I was a child of the spook world. I was a child of black ops. I needed a Julian Assange and a WikiLeaks to negotiate a public declaration and a public education campaign on my behalf. I had great covert skills. I had great skills for negotiations on back channel issues and dealing with these hard matters. But I did not have I had been trained in hiding. The CIA is a cult, really. It's a cult of secrecy. We are indoctrinated to be fearful of sunlight to an extreme degree, which now that I look back on it, I'm stunned myself at how deeply I was immersed in this world. But I needed, for those of you out there who want to know why Julian Assange and WikiLeaks are so vital to public accountability, those of us who are part of this game, we don't have those skills that Julian Assange has. We need him. We really need him. If you want us to be effective in bringing you the truth, then we need people like WikiLeaks who are able to carry us through, to lead us through what for us looks like a mind trap. We don't know how to, I cannot stress enough how everything would have been different if only I'd had access to Julian Assange. And if the whole world would have known about this, I would have made sure. I just didn't know how to do it by myself.
Let's go back now. We've got, so we're right around in the summer of June of 2002 was that
that's when it really,
Education for Peace in Iraq conference that you mentioned, the 2-day conference. Also then some hearings started, right, in Congress. And just to remind people, we had 77 senators that supported it, roughly 85 congressmen. So let's talk about those hearings and who might have had knowledge of this at that time.
That's right. Thank you very much. The hearings, the Education for Peace in Iraq meetings that I attended were very well received. Congressman Nichols' office was excited. J.C. Watts, who was the Republican whip, was excited to hear that Iraq was trying to contribute financial documents on Al-Qaeda. This was a positive, even among hardcore Republicans, the reaction was very strongly favorable. And so I realized that we had a chance, and I began pushing harder. And I want to emphasize that I went to Democrats and Republicans. In July, the end of July, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee held hearings on what should be done in the future of Iraq. And I went to every single Democrat and Republican and hand-delivered copies of the debriefing papers of the peace framework, explaining the different components. Now, these papers had already been given to the White House. As it happens, as fate would have it, my cousin was the chief of staff to President George Bush, Andrew Card. And he received a total of 11 briefing papers before the invasion of Iraq in March of 2003.
These were all different briefings, 11 separate ones over a period of time?
Of 2 years, a period of 2 years.
Okay.
Yes, and so I steadily updated the White House, but by this time I realized that I needed to go directly to Congress, and I needed to make sure that Capitol Hill understood. And so I pushed very hard with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Joe Biden had these papers. Senator John Warner had these papers. Senator Chuck Hagel had these papers, in addition to everyone else.
Everybody on the committee.
Everyone on the committee, Democrat and Republican. I went straight to their offices. I sat down with them. I tried to talk with available staffers. I left behind papers for them to review. I followed up with phone calls. And it was interesting because the FBI, when they later decided they were going to arrest me, it was right at this period that they begin their wiretaps of my phone, that their public declaration of wiretaps. So I have proof of these meetings because I telephoned the staffers after the meetings and followed up with them. And those phone calls are recorded for posterity.
Let's, and the timing of the Foreign Relations Committee hearings?
Approximately July 30th, I believe.
Okay.
And July 29th, July 30th, I believe. It was the end of July.
And they had several committee hearings, I'm assuming?
Several days of hearings.
Yeah.
And I went into these hearings after I had delivered the papers on Capitol Hill. I went into the hearings and listened to the witnesses, and I was appalled. Absolutely disgusted by what I was hearing. Complete ignorance of events on the ground.
And you were not able to testify?
Well, I was a covert asset, and so they would not have wanted me to testify because I knew everything. I knew the real details, and this was public posturing. This was but the people who were talking, it was like they were supposedly policy experts from different. Do
you remember who?
Oh no.
Okay.
I'm sorry. It was so long ago, but they were so ignorant. They were clearly disconnected from any events on the ground, and they were trying to look important, as if their knowledge, they had some special access, and they didn't. Clearly, it was just idiotic.
Okay. So let's then talk about coming out.
But sorry.
Please.
After the meetings, however, after listening to this ridiculous testimony, however, over the next few months, 3 people became strong supporters of diplomacy as a solution to the Iraqi conflict. Almost immediately, Senator Joe Biden, Senator Chuck Hagel, and Senator John Warner announced that they would support a strong diplomatic push to end the conflict in Iraq as an option, as a parallel track to war. And they stayed strong on the push for diplomacy throughout the next, 8 or 9 months, building up to the war in Iraq. So I do believe that they voted. Some of those people voted against the military authorization. I'd have to go back and see who was on the Immortal 23. As Senator Robert Byrd called them, the Immortal 23 who opposed it in the Senate. But the key thing was that those people who got the debriefings and saw the papers pretty much unanimously came out against the war, including Republicans who got it. So of the people who like only 6 Republicans in the House of Representatives voted against the war, and of those 6, I think 4 of them had received my debriefings. So it did have an impact. And if only the peace community guys had supported this and had accepted my offering to receive a debriefing themselves. They didn't want a debriefing. They wouldn't allow me to debrief their members. And if you guys had gotten on board, we would have made sure that the public had knowledge of this.
How about the media? Was any of the media outlets notified?
I notified the New York Times, tried to give them the papers. Of course, we now know that the New York Times and Judith Miller was channeling for Ahmed Shalabi, and the dishonesty of the Iraqi exile community, pretending that they were overstating their source material in declaring that Iraq was definitely in possession of weapons of mass destruction. And Judith Miller really destroyed her own reputation on that issue, really shamed herself. I did not go to her directly, however, with the peace option. I recall that it was a man that I had tried, a couple of men who I had tried to speak with, who also they would not touch it. I went to Chris Matthews at Hardball, at MSN, I guess it was MSNBC, Hardball, and tried to get him to cover it. They said that they would only say what the government wanted them to say. Of course, CNN and all of these corporate media were championing the propaganda of war. And so they were looking at this for a ratings push only. Another despicable reason to go to war is that, you know, I groaned that it was like Evelyn Waugh's story Scoop, which is that the media creates a crisis and a war so that they can get readers and ratings and viewers and get eyeballs on their programming and their advertising, and they think it's this great adventure until the bombs start falling, and then you have crisis and chaos.
Any other media outlets besides the New York Times? Any other that did you send it out to?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
No, but you have to understand that at that stage, the internet was still young. Mostly the internet had blogs that were personal blogs, like you would tell the story of like your child, your diary, your personal diary. And it was a lot of blogs like that. It really wasn't really muscular political blogs like we have today. I think that today, if we'd had the blogs, I would have been able to get this out immediately, and it would have been all over the internet, and we would have stopped this war.
Okay. So now we get to the point with the vote. Again, you talked about the immortal 23 folks like Paul Wellstone, Tom Harkin.
Tom Harkin had this. Yeah. I mean, all the people who had the debriefing, most of them, let me rephrase that. Of the people who voted against the war, most of them had the debriefing.
Okay, including Chuck Hagel.
Including Chuck Hagel, yes.
No, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Who came out in favor of diplomacy, and Joe Biden.
And then we had 77 senators sticking on the Senate side. Mm-hmm. People that voted for it, John Kerry, and voted in favor, I believe. Yes,
John Kerry, who would later run for president. Yes.
Hillary
Clinton. I did not give this debriefing to Hillary Clinton or Chuck Schumer. People say why? They're Democrats. But I also realized that they had strong ties to Israel. And I did not want to, there were few senators on the Democratic side. Dianne Feinstein was considered too passionate for Israel, that I just decided not to go to.
Okay.
Even though they were very powerful, I did not want to. One of the things I was aware of was that if I went to the wrong senators, we could easily ignite the Israeli lobby to try to fight us back and shoot us down. And when we didn't have anyone in the peace community who was willing to go beyond the and the peace community was concerned about going beyond the weapons of mass destruction. They argued that Iraq was only required to prove it had no WMDs in order to get the sanctions lifted, and so to go out and say that there was a whole comprehensive peace framework that they were willing to do would imply that they were obligated to do that in order to get the sanctions lifted. And I was like, no, that's, this, if you want a solution, you better jump on board.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so that sounds like, and then of course we had the vote.
We had the vote in October of 2002, October 2002.
Yeah, the vote, okay. And so then we started moving forward because that was approved.
I immediately, when I saw the vote, even before the vote, when I saw that they were about to vote, when they took up the debate for war, because I am an asset, we are not passive people. We are interactive people. And we take great pride in running a blockade. That's what we do. And so I saw that I had to educate the people educate Congress faster than one-on-one. That it was taking too long to get everybody who I was talking to was ending up supporting the concept of peace. I went to the Michigan senators, Levin and also Debbie Stabenow. But I needed a faster, more aggressive penetration. So I created an email database for every chief of staff in the House and the Senate, every chief of staff, every legislative director, every press secretary, and every foreign policy legislative assistant in the House and the Senate. All Democrats, all Republicans, 100 senators, 435 members of the House of Representatives. And I began to bombard them with papers. Papers, some of them written by you, some of them written by, policy experts that I thought were outstanding. Some of them written by, Kathy Kelly types that were passionate. I did a lot of work with Muthana al-Hanouti, who would later be accused of acting as an Iraqi agent, which was an absolute fallacy, an absolute lie. But he was passionately pro-peace and anti-sanctions. He is a leader of the Arab movement, Arab community in Michigan, and I worked very closely with him on getting out papers for something called Focus on Arab American Interests and Relations that he put together, and just papers that were all anyway. So I began to send emails, and I also created a blast fax list to every House office and Senate office. In the mix of all these papers, I was at the same time putting out the peace offering. And so I began to bombard Congress with documentation showing that peace was possible. We had your message of advocacy, and then I mixed that in with proof that peace could be achieved through the peace option.
This is the report, a final report that was
sent
to them?
Yes. Okay. By December of 2001, the Iraqis had just a couple of months after 9/11, the Iraqis had reached a total definitive package of great and good things that would have accomplished all of what we wanted, and that's when I personally took the offering of the weapons inspections. I was the one who took it to the United Nations Security Council, and within 48 hours of receiving my paper stating that Iraq had agreed to all the U.S. This was another thing that was classified. Let me back up. In February of 2002, before the push for war, I personally delivered a debriefing to the United Nations Security Council and other friendly nations who opposed sanctions on Iraq. And I told them that Iraq had agreed to all U.S. conditions and that they should feel confident that they should start immediate talks to restart the weapons inspections, and that all they needed was the technical language and the document, the legal authorization to do it, and it was ready. Within 48 hours of that meeting, Russia and China and France announced that they were going to invite an Iraqi delegation to come to New York to hammer out the technical language, the technical agreement for restarting the weapons inspections. And that was a direct response to what I had done.
And when was that again for the United Nations?
That was in February of 2002, early February, like the first week of February.
Okay. Did those invitations get accepted?
They were accepted. They were accepted, and Baghdad agreed to. The invitation was made at the beginning of the first week of February, and the meeting was scheduled for March 8th, 9th, and 10th.
Okay.
The meetings were immediately scheduled, and my trip to Baghdad occurred the last week of February and the first week of March, because I wanted to make sure that Baghdad was going to honor all of the commitments that had been made in New York. I recognized, of course, that it would have been catastrophic if Baghdad showed up and reneged on anything that I had just told the Security Council. And so that's when I take my trip to Baghdad, and it was everything. I will tell you that every single thing that I gave the United Nations had been, the United Nations was then aware of the entire peace framework, mind you. They were aware that Iraq had agreed to everything that the United States demanded, in addition to the weapons inspections. They knew about the contracts for American corporations, the oil contracts, the you know, the cooperation with anti-terrorism.
What you talked about before.
Yes, everything I talked about before was known to the United Nations, and the United Nations grabbed it, the Security Council grabbed it and said, yes, let's do it.
The Security Council is the top 5 countries, or?
It's 13.
13, okay.
13.
So, but
5 permanent members.
Did not know, just the Security Council.
Yes.
The 13 countries.
Yeah,
okay.
the 13 countries, but those are the ones that mattered. Yeah. And I also went, actually, not exactly true, I went to the Security Council, I went to other favorable Arab countries. I went to Jordan, Yemen, to Syria, Egypt. I did not go to Saudi Arabia or Kuwait.
Okay.
But I went to Qatar, was another one. The Emirates knew, and they were all at this point. They were like, "Let's end the sanctions. This is genocide against Iraq. This is, you know, this is if we can have a solution." Malaysia also knew. Malaysia had done a beautiful job supporting peace and providing technical assistance throughout the previous 2 years to make sure that the U.S. demands, that what Iraq would agree to in dealing with the U.S. demands would comply with the United Nations requirements as well. So Malaysia was right up there in terms of making this work. So all these nations were advised, but I focused on those who would be favorable and supportive so we could get it through.
Okay. And did the meeting, the March 8th through the 10th, did that take place?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
And it did take place, and the United States, they had to have a follow-up meeting. They demanded that there had to be a follow-up meeting that would have to occur outside the United States. So I think it occurred I believe it occurred in Switzerland.
Okay, and that meeting
I believe it occurred in Switzerland.
With who was there? Which countries were present? Was that the Security Council?
The Security Council was present. I do believe the United States abstained.
Okay.
But all the other countries were there.
Okay.
I believe the United States and Britain were the only ones, but they did not oppose it. They abstained.
Got it.
You see?
Yep.
And this was okay. You know, they couldn't formally come out and say yes,
right.
But they allowed, you know, they didn't veto it because there was no reason to veto it.
So we're kind of getting near the end of our timeline, I think.
Okay,
But how did that happen then, as far as meeting, which is the 8th, 9th, and the 10th, happening, and we invaded 9 days